Thank you, Sherry. We've been trying to follow the steps of Jesus and those footprints, leading us wherever he wants us to go. And one of those places that he has wanted us to go the last several years is to Canada. This is, I think, our 4th year that we've had a partnership with what started as South Winds Mahogany and now is the Junction Church up in Alberta, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So we had a team that went there at the beginning of June, and I'm going to turn it over to Mark Johnston or Danny Rhodes or whoever to carry Sartain. You never know what's going to happen around here. Our new missions team leader, Carrie Sartain. There is no one clapping so loudly as Rosemary Rhodes, actually, not Danny, but the spouse of our former and still very much helpful missions team leader. But Carrie Sartain, missions team leader.
Well, thank you, Pastor. I thought maybe Danny would come up here since he's here. The only reason I'm here is because Danny didn't think he was going to be here tonight. But, and I'm sure he has a few words for us about the upcoming trip. But as you've heard, there are many things going on with missions relating to the church, many programs underway. The trip to South Winds to Junction Church, as you'll hear, was one of those important ones. We've had reports from other trips. The mission conference coming up, I'm too excited about Dr. Ford. I think that's going to be tremendous, and the other missionaries that are coming. So I would say don't miss that. Also, don't forget to get your tickets for the dinner out in the lobby after church. If you don't have them, sign up so we can get a count. Everybody needs a ticket for dinner. Really, I don't have anything else I want to say. Danny, do you want to say anything about your upcoming trip before we get started, or don't?
Okay. We have 6 from our church and 2 others going for a team of 8 to Conway.
Team of 8, 6 from this church. And what time are you leaving?
8 o'clock in the morning.
8 o'clock in the morning. So Danny and Brian Simmons and Mark Cole,
Mark Johnston, Emerson Shai.
Yeah, what I was thinking is several of you guys have been working really hard on preparing this trailer to get it ready to go, which looks really good with the decals on it and everything out in the parking lot. If you've noticed the white trailer out there with the decals on it. So looking forward to seeing what comes from that trip. So I am going to turn it over to Mark Johnston, and I'll let Mark take it from here.
Okay, team, come on up, please. So we had the opportunity to go to Canada way back in June, and it does seem like a long time ago. We were unable to kind of coordinate schedules to get our trip report, but we're glad we have the opportunity to do it now. So we went back in June 23rd, the last week in June. And that picture you see up there is the church building. Okay, and it doesn't look like a church building, but that's the beach house of that neighborhood, and that's where they hold church every week. So that's a little different. So this is our team, and I think hopefully you know everybody here. We have my wife and I, the Ivies, Laura and Jonathan Moore, Carla Ansley and Ian Brock, and then Emily Saxon, who is a relatively new member. She joined the church early last year, and she had a death in the family this week, and she was not able to be with us. But this was our team that went off. And both the Ivies and Jan and I, this was our second opportunity to go. So I'm going to let everybody else sit down briefly, and then we'll call them back up. So Pastor mentioned the history that we have with this church, and it kind of started 4 years ago or so. A gentleman by the name of Brett Myers, who is the pastor of a church here in our area in Westminster. And I think, Pastor, he was one of your having a senior moment. Accountability, thank you. Accountability partners.
It was headed in that direction. He actually moved out before we started.
Okay, so back in 2014, he felt the call to go to Canada to start this church, and in April. And then in the summer was the first, our first involvement. We sent a few folks. I think Joe went, and maybe Dave Hooper done. Next year, okay. So we had a few folks that went up, and then in the 2015, we had our first team that went up. We had 10 folks that went up to support one of their camps, a soccer camp. Then in 2016, we sent a financial gift as opposed to sending a team. And then in 2017, we had 12 folks that went, Jan and I included. In fact, in 2015, the Ivies went to that soccer camp. And then last year, we worked t-ball camps and a baseball camp. So this year it's a little bit different, and it started out after we got our team organized and getting ready to go. We found out that Pastor Meyer accepted a call to preach at a church here in Hilton Head. So he, in the spring, took off and went to Hilton Head to assume that new role. But we continued on, and we sent our group of 10 to work with what we're calling Kids Play Day, and you'll see little pictures and we'll better explain what we were trying to do while we were up there. Now, this is a wonderful slide, and I spent a lot of time on it. It's very colorful, and you can't read a darn thing on there, okay? And I feel kind of bad about that, because it's a great slide. So this is our agenda for the week, our schedule for the week, and up in the top left, or on Saturday, we traveled all day, and I mean all day, and we got in, probably got to bed about 1:30 in the morning, and on Sunday, we had the opportunity to help set up the church, and I refer to this as a church in a box, and that may not be a very nice thing to say, but that's kind of what it is. And that trailer on the left, that contains everything you need to do to have church. Okay, so that's got Bibles, it's got coffee makers, that you need those to have church. It has speakers, it has a cross, it has a pulpit, sound system, you name it, everything is in that trailer. And every week, they get a crew that comes and unloads that trailer. So we were able to help do that. And as I mentioned, it's the whole church at the Mahogany Beach Club. They have a nice room, they set it up, and they conduct church there. So once you set it up, church is conducted, tear it back down and fill that trailer back up. So that was Sunday morning. We had lunch, we had an orientation, and then we obviously had dinner, and then you'll hear a little bit about our devotion period that we had every night. On Monday, a little unusual for the schedule, we were able to go up to the Canadian Rockies and go to Banff and do a little tourism stuff, and I didn't bring any slides for that this year. But in the morning, each day, through Tuesday through Thursday, we went out to the site where we were going to have our camp. And that was a special time, and every morning we would go out to the site and we'd pray over the field, and then we would do a prayer walk. And you'll hear a little bit about this from others, but this was different for me, okay, where we spent almost 2 hours walking the neighborhood, walking the sidewalks. We broke up into teams, and just praying for that community, that they would come out. And so, we're going to pray for 2 hours as we walk. Oh boy, that's challenging for me, okay? And it was really eye-opening and a neat experience. But to walk by and see a kid's bike and says, hey, this is a young man, and this is a boy or girl that needs to hear about Christ. And again, it was another opportunity, if we saw people, to invite them out to the program. But as you'll probably hear, there was a lot of praying going on this week. And we started off each day praying at the site where we were going to be working. So the only change that we had really in that morning prayer activity was on Friday morning, we were able to help a woman, a church member who was going through a rather ugly divorce, pack her things. And we literally got in there and moved her furniture out and put it into a storage unit. The highlight of that event was David and I carrying a 1,000-pound sofa, I'm pretty sure that's how much it weighed, from the second floor through the bendy stairway out to the trailer without any of the three individuals involved, the two individuals and the sofa, being damaged. But it was a ministry opportunity for us to help this woman, and I'm sure she appreciated that. So in the afternoon, then we set up camp, okay? And our goal was to go to these neighborhoods, attract the families, the children, to this play day. We had bouncy houses and a bunch of other stuff, and to promote the camps and get them to register. They could register on site, or they got all the materials they needed to register for the camp. So that was our goal. A little bit different. And Jan will talk a little bit more about differences when we do running camps to here when we're doing this registration activity. So here's a couple other pictures of us at the camps themselves, running the bouncy houses. We had snow cones. Again, we always started the day in prayer. And then there was the tearing down of the camp. Once you set it up, that's fine. You run the camp for 2 hours, then you take it down. Now, this is a great example of learning by doing, okay? Because the first time we did it, we were pretty bad, okay? And we were pretty slow, and Denise allowed lots of extra time for us to set up. Same thing. You're kind of tired, you're kind of grumpy, and then you got to put all that stuff back in the trailer. And the first time we did it, 45 minutes to an hour. Next day, 50 minutes. Next day, 40 minutes. Next day, 25 minutes. We had that trailer filled up, no problem at all. So people ask me, what would you like to have different done next year? Well, we had a good team, but I would love to have had more men, okay? Because there's some heavy lifting involved in this activity, whether it be moving that nice lady or hauling this stuff in and out of the trailer. So, guys, here's your challenge, here's your request. If we go back next year, we could use your help because, frankly, we do need some muscle in doing this type of activity. So I'm going to turn it over to Danielle, and she's going to talk about our nightly devotions.
Okay, so we were given a devotional series to take with us. Brett Myers' mom had put that together for a team several years ago, and the purpose was to either prepare to go to Canada and to serve and prepare your heart that way, or to use it while you were there. And our team chose to use that devotion while we were there. So each day we would use that devotion as part of our personal devotion time, and then we would come together in the evenings and talk through that. So the theme of that devotional series was a laser focus. And so the L was for love God. A, allow God's love to flow through us. See the field white unto harvest in front of us. Experience our part, whether it's sowing, watering, or reaping. And run our race with perseverance, never giving up. And the verse that we focused on throughout the week was, we focused on Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. And that's from Hebrews 12:2. So we really just focused on that throughout the week. We, like I said, we did our personal devotion so that we could really answer the questions and see where the Lord was working in our own life. And then in the evening, we would come together after dinner, and everybody was tired and kind of ready just to turn in for the night. But we had that really special time where our team really got to know one another really well. And one adult each night was responsible for the devotion. And so they were prepared so that they could kind of lead us through that, whatever was on their heart. We talked through the questions, talked through the scripture, and so we really got to know one another. We got to know kind of what was going on in each other's lives and what God was doing in each of our lives, and how we could support one another, encourage one another, pray for one another throughout the week. So it was a really good time for that. Who's next?
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the differences in the camps with the sports camp and then what we did as I called them fun days. With the sports camp, you got a team of kids that you worked with all week, so you really got to know those kids pretty well. And the fun days, you've got a different group, and the kids just fly through all the activities, and so you don't really, you talk to them a little bit, but not that much because they're busy running around. And the neat thing about the groups, though, they would come, and these are neighborhoods, so they would bring, the adults would bring their chairs or a blanket, and they'd sit and stay the whole time, and I thought that was pretty cool. They'd be talking to each other, and then Denise and Elaine would have a chance to talk to them, too. So it was different, but it was good. And like Mark said, well, with the sports camp, we set up twice a day, 2 different camps, and you just have your equipment, so you have the bats or whatever other equipment you need. But for this, those bouncy houses are really heavy, so that was, I'm glad we only did 1 a day. We would have been exhausted, I think, if we'd done 2. So.
I wanted to talk just a minute about the sort of spiritual side of what we saw of the people that we talked to in Canada. Ryan, you had preached a sermon back in March about evangelism that really had a big impact on me, that I think so often we get in our head that to be successful at evangelizing, there has to be a conversion. If the person doesn't accept Christ and pray a prayer of salvation on the spot, then you have failed as your role of evangelist. And what he said in that sermon is that you're really looking for a conversation. It's not about the conversion, it's about moving them one step closer. So as I tried to engage people in Canada, I kind of had that in mind, that my goal is not to force them to accept Jesus in the middle of this snow cone and bouncy house place, but to get them interested, to get them wanting to come back and visit the church. So it was very easy, actually, in that environment, because there were so many people from other countries. I wasn't expecting that in Calgary. I was kind of had this idea that everyone would look sort of kind of Swedish or something, that there'd be sort of a Canadian look. But there wasn't. There were people, it was truly an international city. And so I would go up and I would talk to somebody, and there was one woman that I talked to that she was in the native garb from India. So I said, I said, where are you from? Obviously, she was from India. But it gave her a chance to talk. And then I'd say, well, tell me, what is your religion over there? What do you believe? And she would talk about her Hindu faith and how, they work to get your greater reward and on and on. And after I'd listened for a while, I felt at that point I had earned the right to speak into her life. I've listened very nicely for 5 minutes as she's talked about her faith. So I said, can I share with you what I believe? And I would share some about the Christian faith, and I'd ask her, what do you think about that? And she said, well, she basically said, what you say makes sense, but she said, I just really like being Hindu. I like all my Hindu friends. I like going to my Hindu church. So for her, the barrier was not what she believed. It was her sense of community. For her to leave her faith meant to leave her family and her sense of fellowship. So that's one barrier that people at Junction Church have to overcome, that they have to be able to form a community, because so many of these people are immigrants. Having that family feel is very important to them. And then another person I talked to, I was asking her what she believed, and she said, well, I would really love to believe the Bible, but she said, I just don't understand the Trinity. And I'm thinking, oh boy, here I am in the middle of all these kids, so I've got to explain the Trinity. And I often fall back, I teach the first grade Sunday school class, and I so frequently fall back on what we do in there, because when you're teaching little kids, you got to be short and to the point. So I just kind of gave her the answer I would have given a small child, and I said, well, if you think of who I am, I said, I am a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm an aunt, I'm a cousin. I said, those are all different ways people think of me, but I'm still me. And she kept talking, and I sort of thought of her, she's a seeker. She's someone who's interested in the faith, but she still has a lot of questions. So I directed the Denise is the person we've talked about, but Elaine was another worker at the church, and I pointed her out to Elaine, and Elaine went over there and said to her, I would love to have a Bible study, just the two of us this summer, where we can explore some of these questions, and she did, and that woman eventually joined their church, and she became saved through Elaine's continued ministry. So again, my job wasn't there to force a conversion, it was to open the conversation, which Elaine then took months to continue. Then other people I talked to, especially the people from South America, there was a heavy Brazilian population. I thought, can you imagine being from Brazil and living in Canada? That would be like, whew, that would be a shocker. But the people from Brazil, a lot of times they had a strange mixture of Catholicism and something that I couldn't quite identify. So some of them would say, oh yes, I'm a Christian. But then once I talked to them more, I realized that no, they didn't actually understand what they thought they believed. So I found that when we were up there, trying to communicate the gospel to people, there were certain barriers that were a little bit different than what we might have here, although I suspect John and Elena, you see that probably all the time in the ministry that you do, but just being sure that they understand what is the Christian faith, and to understand for the church to understand the need to have community to be able to bring these people in. So yeah, I really enjoyed getting to talk to the people up there. I found that to be a big blessing to me.
So all I really want to talk about is just going into a mission trip, like Ansley and Jonathan, who have never been to another country or just another mission trip or just outside of the church very much. So going to Canada, what I was expecting was, my main thought was hockey. And like Dave, big hockey fan, and that's all I could think about when I think Canada. And it's just so different. So I was expecting a lot of people to be, like the economy to be very poor. Just wasn't expecting like what I'd heard, like not very many Christians. And the area, we went into the city and we got to see like the economy, and it's booming. And so you get to see that, and then it's just so different from what you expect. And all these people have a lot of money, but they'd never heard the faith and just how different it is. And what they get to see, and they're so blinded. You think that they have everything with what you see with houses and money and everything, but it's just so different from what you really think about. They're kind of blinded from the faith.
To kind of go along with what Ian said, we kind of got there, and you see how I called it a utopia. There's the city, and then you drive out to all the little neighborhoods where we would work, and everything's clean, and everything, you don't see people on the street. I never saw any homeless people. I never saw anybody begging for money. And everybody's got this little postage stamp yard. So you kind of think, why are we here? And I guess when people think of mission trips, they think you're going to do some kind of relief work, and that is part of it. But everybody needs Jesus. And people who think they have it all and have it all together aren't often looking for it like the people who have a lot of material needs. I just got this presentation that we were given about 5 minutes ago, so I would have had it put up here, but for some reason Denise shared it with me and I couldn't open it, except unless she sent it to my school email. So just to give you a little bit of background, they don't have a pastor right now, so it's Denise and Elaine. And Elaine, her official title is Minister to Women, Children, and Outreach, and then Denise is the Minister to Youth, Summer Camps, and Marketing. They do have an interim coming, but he just basically comes, and he's something with Canadian National Baptist Association. I'm not sure his very busy man, but he comes into Calgary and preaches for them on Sunday morning. So all the pastoral duties goes to Elaine and Denise. Just to let you know a little bit about Canada, they have a population of 35,540,419. There are Canadian National Baptist congregations. There are only 360 in the entire country. The population, the statistic I thought was amazing. There's only one Canadian National Baptist church for every 112,000 people. The number of non-evangelicals is 90%. It's only about 10% identify with an evangelical church. And about 48% are unaffiliated with any religious body. Then when you get just down to Calgary, where we were, the population is 1.4 million. The percentage of evangelicals is about 5.2. And the population per congregation of Canadian Baptists is 1 for every 44,586 people. And Calgary is the 4th largest city in Canada. They gave us this was our orientation before we started, and this is actually a quote by Henry Blackaby. Most Canadians are not opposed to the gospel, they just have never heard it. And then I did a little research myself on Canada, and it says Islam is the fastest growing religion in Canada. Most, 39%, identify with the Roman Catholic Church, 28% with other Christian organizations. But what we saw was, I think I saw 3 churches in the time that we were there. One being one downtown, because we went down to downtown Calgary. I don't even remember what denomination it was. A Mormon church, and then a church that's like a mega church, and it was the Alliance Church. So out of all that time, and in each neighborhood, like this blew my mind, each neighborhood that we worked in, like we stayed in Cranston, and Johnston's, you were in, what was the name of that community? I'm drawing a blank. Seton. So out in this little suburbia, this utopia, there's communities of anywhere from 15 to 30,000. And we stayed in one, and they were in another, and then we targeted Auburn Bay, which was another one, and then Mahogany. That's where the actual church, that's where actual Junction Church is. So just tons and tons of people, and we were very, our eyes were very open to the different ethnicities. So I looked in the top, and I think this is what we saw. The top immigrants in Canada are Filipino. We saw a lot of Filipinos, Indian, then Chinese, and then Spanish speaking. That's kind of the immigrants that they see there. But the reason that the ministry there is, I was thinking, it's not a sprint, it's a very, very, very slow crawl, because you're dealing with people who are so unfamiliar with the gospel that, like, we were shocked, people who'd been before, we were like, is this always how many people they have in church? Because with the 10 of us, it was like maybe between 40 and 50 people. Now the children were downstairs. It seemed really discouraging, like there hadn't been a lot of growth since people had been before. But then you talk to Elaine and Denise, and they're very excited, and there's new people all the time. And so our vision of what growth would be is very different than what the growth that they were seeing. And then the fact that the lady that Laura had spoken with we found out, and I asked Denise today about celebrations that we could give, and that was one of them, was that lady had come to Christ. Also, the lady that we helped move and clean out her refrigerator, ladies, that was fun. She was baptized and joined the church over the summer also. I talked about the churches. So this is what Denise shared with me. Celebrations, two people accepted Jesus into their hearts this summer, one parent and one camper from tween camp. They had some new tween camps that they had not done before, so I guess kids that are maybe like 10 to 12, they had a music camp one week, a drama camp one week, and so they had the one camper from the camp and the one parent, and the parent turned out to be the one that Laura had talked to, and she has 3 daughters, and she says they've not missed a Sunday since. Their pastor search team, I asked her what we could pray for, and she said they're interviewing a candidate next Sunday, and they're trusting God to open and close doors. If it's not the person that they're meant to have, they just want the doors to be closed, and if it's the person that they're meant to have, they want that door to open. And she said that if you could pray for Elaine. Elaine is finishing up her master's this semester, and she's very overwhelmed by school and church since they don't have a senior pastor. And Denise said, she's been a great resource for me, and every day I am more and more thankful for her and her leadership. For myself, I'm taking on more responsibility and tasks that I never thought I would, and it's difficult, so pray for guidance and wisdom in the months to come. And one more thing I wanted to share is that the prayer walking for 2 hours, to be honest and go ahead and confess to you, I said, we're going to pray for 2 hours. I did not have the best attitude. I can confess that to you, as I was thinking, I'm going to walk around this neighborhood for 2 hours. I'm going to come up with something to pray. And I would say Laura Moore was a very, very good influence, because she made me realize that prayer is important. And the fact that I didn't think I could come up with enough, I didn't have to speak every minute of the 2 hours. And she said, well, why don't you turn on some music and just sing around the neighborhood? And so through songs, you can pray whatever the truth of the song that's being sung. And my son amazed me. He didn't even have earbuds. He just turned his phone on and sang all through the neighborhood. He does not care. So I had on my earbuds. But, we don't have to pray words of our own. And the other thing that Laura suggests is pray. When you don't know what to pray Scripture. And we attended they have a Thursday night prayer meeting, and it's at someone's house. And we walked in, and it was that one family and the staff. See, that to me, that's discouraging. but it was the most meaningful prayer I've ever been to. The lady who owned the home and who leads the prayer, if you need anything prayed for, you need to contact. I can't remember her name, but she was amazing. And she had books all over the table to help you aid in the prayer, how to pray through the scriptures. And I took pictures of things. And one of the things I took a picture of is she had this, and it wouldn't turn out as a slide because I took a picture with my phone and you blow it up and it's all blurry. But what to pray for. And this was just for their church. And I'm going to give you just some bullet points. What to pray for. Number one, that we would have unity and diversity. Loving those with whom we have nothing in common but the gospel. Number two, that a culture of discipling would form in which making disciples is viewed as an ordinary part of Christian life. So many churches now you see, we had 50 baptized in the parking lot, but I want to know what are you doing? What are you doing after they're saved? How are you discipling them? Christian life is not easy. How are you doing that? But to pray for that faithful elders would use Scripture to train members to do the work of ministry. Number four, that a hunger for studying the gospel would form among members. That transparent, meaningful relationships. Just the things that she had us just to pray for were just really, really great. And so I learned a lot about prayer during that trip.
Okay, so just to kind of wrap up, since our trip, and I got this information from Elaine just this afternoon, they had over 300 children attend their summer camps. And this is their primary outreach to their community. And so that's a big success, and she was really quite thrilled with that. In fact, she makes a point of telling us, if we were to run a VBS, nobody would come because they don't know what VBS is. But they know what a soccer camp is. And then we can teach soccer skills or baseball skills, and then we can share the gospel, which is what they do during those camps. So they had a great summer camp season. They've seen a rise in number in their church every Sunday. New visitors, and she's very encouraged. And as Laura said, when we were there that Sunday, they had a total of 49 at church, and that included 10 of us and all the kids. And I looked at Jan and said, "This is kind of sad. This is fewer than we saw last year when we were here." And just as I was getting bummed out, a lady had raised her hand and joins the church that day, and I said, "Well, geez, that's progress, and that's the way things are going." And Pastor Meyer is a pretty neat guy. I shouldn't say was, he is a neat guy. Very, very, very personable, very loving, obviously instrumental in building the church. And when he left, that leaves a hole. And not only in the pulpit, but in the hearts of some of the staff as well. And I know Denise was a little bummed out this spring. So when she sent this note that summer was overwhelming, as well as encouraging, I'm in awe of how God used mission teams like Utica's to further his work here when it seemed like we might not have a summer at all when our pastor left. Thankful God sees the big picture. So that was really kind of neat. And so it's kind of nice to see that she's on an upbeat note and the staff is on an upbeat note. Now I did ask Denise about their pastoral search, and I believe she's a member of the search committee. And like all good search committee members, she didn't divulge any secrets. So she just told us the truth. They're interviewing somebody, and if that's who the Lord has for them, praise the Lord. If not, they'll move on. So that thus ends our formal presentation. And I know you're not used to leaving early on Sundays here at the Utica Baptist Church. So I've left time for questions and answers. We can go for another 30, 40 minutes if you have a lot of questions. And that way you'll feel more comfortable and get home at your normal time. Any questions at all?
Somebody said to me, when I said
And you realize, I mean, the 10 of us, without the 10 of us, they wouldn't have been able to do the fun days, period. And without the other church groups, I think when we went last year, we had 25 to 30 folks running 2 camps simultaneously. They can't do it by themselves. So they do need our bodies, literally, to help them conduct these camps and make it a success for their outreach.
I was just going to ask, what do you see, what do you think they see as their needs of the future from people like us?
Well, and I know Danny's talked to her a lot as well, but they just appreciate our bodies. I really mean our bodies and our physical support and our physical presence to help them make these things happen. So they really enjoy that. I don't know any details, but in talking to Elaine, she said one group didn't show up. So if you can imagine, you've got a camp all set up, you're counting on 10, 15, 20 people, and they don't show up. I don't know what she did, but she likes, I'll say she likes our dependability. She likes the way we've been consistent. It's nice that we have had groups that have been up there multiple times that can kind of know the ropes, so to speak, and fit right in relatively easily. But they certainly need our physical presence to make the summer camps work. They have an aging van that is on its last legs. They need financial support, contributions for a van, that physical need. But, you know, like any other evangelism or missionary effort, they continue to need our prayers and our encouragement as they do their work. I don't know, Danny, if you have anything you would add to that, or?
Well, I just repeat some of what you said. Denise said that she loves Utica Church because she can depend upon Utica. They come with a group of people who are motivated to work, they work hard, and it's a blessing to her because not only of her personal affiliation with Utica, but because of the relationship that has been established over the 4 years of coming there. And she said, you know, I don't want to be selfish, but I will be selfish. She says, I love Utica and I want Utica to continue to come. I might mention that we are examining whether or not we will continue to go there in the future, we being the missions team and the staff. And at this juncture, we've committed to continue our financial support for Denise. We send her a monthly stipend, and we've also agreed to put into the budget for next year the money for scholarships to send a team next year. And that process is still ongoing. We're not real sure how that will work out, but that is our position currently, is to continue at least into next year with that.
Any other questions? Yes, Emerson?
Is the area still growing? Is there a lot of construction?
Unbelievably. And I know this is an exaggeration, but if you can just kind of picture this city just kind of expanding, it's like there's farmland and they're plowing it over, and there really are wonderfully designed communities. They have all range and types of houses, from single homes to duplexes to condominiums to apartments. Then you have all the shopping nearby. You have all the recreation built right into that community. It is just an amazing community. But you wouldn't believe the construction going on in that area. It's just growing. And we said the economy is booming. The economy is booming. And they just continue to layer out. And that's kind of how the church got started to begin with. There was a church there, Southwinds Church there, in one of their communities, and as these communities expanded, they needed another church to help service this next community, and that's just what's happening. But yes, Emerson, like that section of the city is growing like crazy. And it's very expensive to live there, okay, and they're very open to the fact that they'll never have a building, okay, it's just can't afford it, okay, so they have a great situation. Challenging, but it's a great situation and it meets their current needs. John?
Were there any lessons learned for us out of what you saw and what your experience did? And by us, I mean you.
Well, I'll open that to the floor. Anybody else want to answer that? Yes, sir. I think to me, the thing that continued to hit me, and I saw it in my business life when I went to Canada, is the diversity, and I think Laura mentioned that. We heard multiple languages being spoken, and homeland dress, and if the parents spoke English, grandma was there, she didn't speak English, okay? And grandpa was there, he didn't speak English. So to me, I know we especially in your job, we talk about the world coming to Clemson. The world goes to Calgary. It really is very, very diverse, and it's just an amazing thing. That's the thing that impact I see. I think Laura said the other thing. It's not quick evangelism. We're not going to get saved today. But that's the challenge, and that's probably the reality of evangelism in that area, and probably here too. And anybody else want to add, or? Well, I think as was said, they're not opposed to Christianity, they just don't know anything about it, So. So I guess I would challenge you, if you have a desire to go next year, assuming we go as a church. For those of you not retired, or not an educator like the rest of the team is an educator, and save that week of vacation for sometime next summer. And if we choose to go, we'd love to have you. It's, I think we said, you think of a mission trip as suffering for Jesus in some third world country, and that clearly is not what this is. But there's as much need for evangelism in Calgary as in any other place in the world. So.
Great job, team. I'm looking forward to seeing what the Lord wants us to do next year. We don't know for sure yet, and a lot of that will depend on if this pastor is called. They're interviewing, because of course he will help chart the course for what continues at Junction Church. But it's encouraging to see that the Lord has been using our presence and our support and our encouragement to help them continue doing that. And in many ways, I see that we're going there to help them, but it's also kind of a training ground for what may very likely be becoming our future here in the Southeast. I just received a book the other day comparing, basically talking about how America, and especially the Southeast, over the past 30, 40, 50 years, has been very similar to Peter's sermon at Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. In which he was talking to primarily a Jewish environment that knew the scriptures, knew God, knew that God loved the people, and they just needed to understand how Jesus was the Messiah. And so they're starting from a very religious base and a very scripturally informed base. And for most of our growing up, that's what the Southeast has been. You haven't had to start the conversation with people wondering whether or not they knew what you were talking about. But how, especially Canada's already there, and America may be headed there, or is headed there already possibly, that it's more now like Acts 17 with Paul preaching in Athens to these people who had all these gods, and they think that God might fit in there somewhere, but they don't really know where that is. And so I would encourage us as a church, I think the team has encouraged us greatly in how we can prepare for that, not only to do that work in Calgary, but to do that work here. Because to answer Jan's question, are there not things that we can do around here? Absolutely, and we better be doing those things in between our trips to Calgary. So let me encourage you, 2 things that you need to know very, very well if the Lord's going to use you to, going back to that sermon from last March, that prayer, care, share, witness is cooperating with God and others to bring people lovingly, one step at a time, closer to Christ. If you want to be able to cooperate with God and others to bring people to one step closer to Christ, you better know two things very clearly. You better know the gospel. You better know what God's plan of salvation really is. It's not about works. It's not about coming to church. It's not about doing this or doing that, because what we do is what gets us in trouble. It is what Christ has done for us. And that's why, I'll never apologize about continuing to preach gospel-centered sermons, because we as Christians need to hear the gospel. We need to understand the gospel very, very well. We sang about it earlier, Billy. I love to tell the story for those that know so well, hunger and thirst to hear that story. And so we are that group. We need to hunger and thirst for the gospel, and we better know it clearly. We better be able to articulate it. So know the gospel, and then know your story, and know how your story fits into the gospel. And then when you meet somebody out on the street or at work or in the grocery store or on the soccer field or wherever you meet them, you can tell your story about how God has intervened in your life and pursued you in Christ and made you a different person, and you don't have to get all the way through it in one sitting. I think that our context is becoming more and more and more of that slow, steady, loving evangelism where prayer matters more than we could ever imagine, and then the perseverance of just telling the story. So I think Canada is a great preparation ground for us, and I think God is using us in tremendous ways to be an encouragement to that church in what I'm sure is a very challenging time in the life of their church. So we'll see what the Lord wants us to do, but thank you for your faithfulness, because it is your financial faithfulness that makes it possible for us to send teams there, and we appreciate that. It's also your financial faithfulness that allows us to do ministry here, and we appreciate that too. So let's thank the Lord as we're praying, and let's pray for Junction Church, and especially for that pastor that's being interviewed, that God would make his will very clear to the pastor and to the church, that if that's the right fit, then they can be off and running, and if not, they can continue to look for who God is calling